Ladies and gentlemen, this is Michael Dean. You're listening to Podcast Juice, the Prince podcast. Notice the name change slightly. We may get into that. Joining me today is Mr. BigSexy and Saxer. How are you?
You know, I am doing well, getting my dance on, enjoying the Saturday.
All right. Also joining us is KaNisa from Muse to the Pharaoh. Of course, one of our sister shows. She's a sister. Well, how are you doing, KaNisa?
It's a beautiful day in Atlanta, I think. I haven't actually looked outside yet.
All right. And also, our social media master here at Podcast Juice, Mr. AntPooh. Sir, how are you?
Wagwan, I'm doing good. Feeling my Jamaican in-laws.
Hilarious. Also, we have a special guest today, all the way from Funkatopia, Mr. Chris Horton. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Man, we're doing great, man. I'm happy to have you on. So, today we're going to get things going, and we want to have a conversation about the recently announced deal between Prince's estate and Sony Music. And I got the press release here. I want to read a little bit of that, and then we get into our commentary about it. So this was announced on June 27th, 2018. And it says Sony Music Entertainment and the estate of Prince Rogers Nelson have inked an exclusive distribution agreement covering 35 essential previously released album titles from the Prince catalog. Says the Prince catalog covered under the new agreement will be distributed by Legacy Recordings, which is a division of SME, with worldwide rights beginning immediately to 19 previously released album titles, originally released between the years of 1995 and 2010. So the list of albums includes The Gold Experience from 95, Emancipation from 1996, Rave Unto the Joy Fantastic, which is 1999, The Rainbow Children, 2001, and 3121, 2016. Now, as well as titles originally distributed by Sony, including Musicology, which is in 2004, and Planet Earth from 2007. Now, it says additional album titles from 2014 to 2015 will be distributed with worldwide rights under the deal in the future. In addition to the album titles from 95 to 2010, the agreement also includes rights to other previously released material recorded post 1995, including singles, B-sides, remixes, non-album tracks, live recordings, and music videos. And then it says, there's a kind of interesting here. It says starting 2021, Sony Legacy distribution rights will expand to include 12 Prince non-soundtrack catalog albums featuring iconic music recorded by the artist from 1978 to 1996 for distribution in the United States, which is interesting to note that it's only for America. Music from this period covered under the agreement includes the highly renowned albums, of course, Prince, Dirty Mind, Controversy, 1999, Around the World Today, Sign of Times, Love Sexy, Diamonds and Pearls, and the Love Symbol album, as well as hit singles, 1999, Little Red Corvette, I Want to Be Your Lover, Raspberry Beret, and much more. With all of that said, I really want to get you guys' thoughts on this, and what do you think this, can move things forward for the estate and for fans going forward. I'm going to give my quick take on this. I think that this is a cool idea. I think it's a good deal. One thing I noticed that this deal doesn't do the press release that the previous deal with Universal, they were quick to, put that $30 million, was a $31 million thing up front. This speaks of no sort of money at all. Not to say that they didn't get some, but obviously they're not. That's not the focus this time around on the press release. It is about the actual music, not how much was made. But I do think that it's interesting that they don't tell you what the deal was worth. And I think that it's cool that there's an opportunity for Prince's later work to be, get some shine. I'm curious. One thing they don't do is give you any sort of release dates. Because they said they get the rights immediately. So I'm wondering, are they planning on doing like CD releases, or are these just things that these albums are going to go to the streaming platforms out there and put them that way. It doesn't make mention of any sort of remixing or remastering or bonus material, and I don't think that they forgot to say those things. It's interesting they do not mention that at all. So I'm curious what this will actually mean for these releases, and going forward, you're thinking ahead of 2021. Where will albums be at that point? It's a few years away, but already we're sort of at a point where, there isn't really any places you can go buy a CD per se, and there's very little, if any, shelf space in retail that is set aside for CD albums or DVDs for that matter. So I'm curious to see what all this means. I want to start with our guest first. Chris, what's some of your thoughts on this announcement?
Well, I actually have a few thoughts on it.
Sure.
The first thing, obviously, is one of the things that you didn't read on that press release was the statement from Troy Carter, who issued a statement saying that the Sony team's enthusiasm and deep knowledge of Prince's music makes them an ideal partner to release these iconic bodies of work. We're looking forward to working with the Heirs and Sony on giving fans what they've been waiting for, more great music from Prince. There's a couple things in there. The first thing is that whatever happened with the Warner Brothers deal that happened in 2014, because this all was supposed to, granted he was getting back his music as far as the copyrights were concerned, but what does this actually mean as far as, the distribution of these albums that have been out of rotation for a long time, 31, 21 and Rainbow Children and all these, that's a good thing. But the other thing is, did Warner Brothers did they not have enthusiasm and a deep knowledge of Prince's music? These are guys that have been involved with him since the 70s. So I think out of all the labels that are out there, they obviously have the most, the deepest knowledge out of all of them. I could imagine that any record company that would have the capability to be able to get this library from and get this catalog would definitely be enthusiastic, as any record label would, to have that opportunity. But the other thing that sticks out to me about this statement is the more great music from Prince. More insinuates something different. And I want to think that maybe there may be some unreleased music that may be included on some of these re-releases. That's my biggest. I think I've seen the statement floating around a couple times that the main thing that Prince fans want right now is some of this unreleased music that's out there. And while I'm glad that we're going to see more distribution, to your point, where are they going to sell this at? Because I'm trying to think of, I can only think of two places that are selling music now in the Atlanta area. That's FYE and Walmart. So I guess that would be my two major questions. Is there going to be more music that is going to be released on these CDs, along with some of these re-releases of, especially these re-releases of these albums that have been out of rotation for a while, Rainbow Children and 3121, and everything that was pretty much done on the Paisley Park label specifically. And again, back to your point again, where exactly, what type of distribution is this going to get? Is it just going to be MP3 only, sold on Amazon? Does this tie in at all with, I don't think Sony and Tidal have anything to do with each other. So I guess it really raises a lot more questions. I think it's exciting news that we're going to get a lot of this music that's going to be readily accessible again. I've always wanted to pick up another copy of Rainbow Children at the store, but it doesn't exist. You can't find it anywhere. So I think unless you go to Discogs or something, one of those other distribution places where you're buying used copies or So I think there's a lot of questions that really have to be answered. It just seems, to me, it just seems like it's a great announcement. I'm excited about it, that there's going to be more distribution of his music, but I'm really apprehensive about getting excited, to be totally honest.
Okay. Respect that. You know, also you made me think of, I wonder what would be cool, I think from a fan's perspective too, maybe the release, a CD release of, albums such as like the Slaughterhouse, and some of these other sort of online only ones, MPG Music Club. That'd be kind of cool if you could get maybe a proper sort of release on some of those.
That'd be fantastic, yeah. Well, Planet Earth was in there, and I think Planet Earth was only given away in a newspaper, right? Well,
it was
as far
released,
as I know, I don't think of it.
In the States, it was released through Sony, actually. Right.
Well, there you go. So that probably could have been the foot in the door for them, I would imagine. I don't know,
Yeah, they did. They did Planet Earth and Musicology was through Sony Columbia. KaNisa, what are some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I'm actually optimistic about it. I was looking at the Sony Legacy record label, and they have a lot of box sets that are extremely comprehensive. It has like DVDs, live shows. They have a bootleg label where they release the live show. They actually call it the bootleg series, and they have several volumes, like the Miles Davis and John Coltrane one. They have it. They're pretty expensive, but I think, like you guys said, since a lot of people don't even really buy CDs like that anymore, the music industry is changing to where the physical media is less a thing. The people who are going to be buying Prince CDs, at least of the fans going forward who don't already have it, are going to be the ones that are willing to put down money like this. Because I think there was a set of I can't remember, but it was like $170, and it had like the wax, it had the CDs, it had a really nice booklet that came with it. It's a collector's item for sure. And then as far as things being available that have been out of print. Of course, Warner Brothers has been putting out at least wax for a while, even before Prince ducked out, where they're remastering or re-releasing like Dirty Mind and all those. And they've had a steady release, especially on the maxi singles, because I do keep up with the wax. And they've had stuff coming out as recent as this year. And The Time has a Neapolitan record coming out this year. That's a remastered version of Ice Cream Castles. So at least from the vinyl perspective, things have been coming out steadily from WB for the last 3 to 4 years. And then I know I saw Lotus Flower come out recently too, even though they had an issue with one of the last versions. They had to re-release it with it fixed. But there is steady music coming out from WB. It's just that you kind of have to dig for it. There's no promo for it. And then a lot of people talking about the Forever box set that came out. Again, not really publicized, but it was a nice set. It had a nice, like, art cards that came out with it, too. So I think Sony has an opportunity here. I'm thinking about the 3121, and on the disc it says the music. And, of course, we knew about the movie that was supposed to come with it, and maybe they can put out the movie now, too. And it talks a lot about unreleased music and live music. And for me, because I have a lot of the new stuff already, I'm going to be giving a lot away to my friends who haven't. I'm going to be doing giveaways on my blog for it. I'm going to be, really, it's about sharing it for the people who haven't heard it. Because at this point, we all know Prince, we all love Prince, but we're all going to be leaving the earth soon. And we have to make sure that people continue to learn and love him. And if it's going to be streaming, if it's going to be these box sets that we'll buy and then pass on to our children, if it's going to be whatever it is, I'm very excited about the Sony, because Prince was more than Purple Rain in 1999, and we're finally going to get people to understand that, because music will be accessible enough to hear it. So that's my argument.
All right. And also want to throw in the mix too. I was, looking up some Sony stuff, and I find it, I don't know if it's ironic, it's interesting that, you can find some stuff on Michael Jackson and, of course, his battles with Sony later in his career. And he was really going at them heavy.
Let me just say this. The tradition of great performers and I really want you to hear what I have to say. The tradition of great performers from Sammy Davis Jr., to James Brown, to Jackie Wilson, to Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly. The story is usually the same, though. You know, these guys work really hard at their craft, but the story ends the same. They usually are broken, torn, and usually just sad. And the story is very sad in the end because the companies take advantage of them. They really do. And Sony being the artist that I am at Sony, I've generated several $1 billion for Sony, several billion, and they really thought that my mind is always on music and dancing, and it usually is, but they never thought that this performer myself would outthink them. So we can't let them get away with what they're trying to do because now I'm a free agent. Yeah. I just owe Sony one more album. It's just a box set, really. It's with 2 new songs, which I've written ages ago. Because every album that I record, I write, like, literally, I'm telling you the truth, I write at least 120 songs every album I do. So I can do the box set and just give them any 2 songs. So I'm leaving Sony a free agent. Owning half of Sony. So I own half of Sony's publishing, and I'm leaving them, and they're very angry at me because of it. But I just did good business, you know.
Tell him. Tell it, Michael. Tell the story.
But so the way they get revenge is to try and destroy my album. But I've always said, you know, good art never dies.
You know, he had this whole campaign. It was a Sony kills music, and he was holding up signs and stuff. It's interesting that, you know, Michael is obviously with Sony, and you know the Michael's estate. They recently redid their deal, got millions of dollars from Sony. You know, shout out to them to get in the bag. And now the Prince estate is with Sony. It's just, you know, it was one of those things where I look at it and I'm like, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of times, man, these big corporations, they're gonna get what they want. You know, good or bad. And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theory, but it's just interesting that both of those two end up, in terms of where their music is going to be sitting, it's going to be sitting at that Sony situation. And, you know, it would have been interesting to see how they would have, obviously there was, you know, on Michael Jackson's part, obviously was a lot to be said from Michael's own mouth about Sony. Of course, things change when people pass away, but I just thought it was very ironic that, wow, Michael and Prince are essentially on the same label. So just wanted to throw that out there. BigSexy, what are some of your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I got a lot of thoughts on it, actually. Going back to what you said about Michael Jackson, I was watching some of his things this morning about Sony, about the statements that were made, and then I just decided on my own to look into his history of publishing with Sony. Now, Sony's publishing arm, which is now Sony ATV, has damn near everything. Now, Sony ATV is not involved with this deal, but this may give them the foothold to get involved and try to move on his publishing. I don't know. As far as Sony Legacy, they do, like KaNisa said, they do great work. I believe they're doing the Bob Dylan bootleg series, which is at number 14, I believe. And a lot of their stuff is available on a lot of the high definition and high resolution streaming sites. I know, like, for instance, over at hdtracks.com, I get a lot of stuff from them, and they do package it as like a regular version. Then they'll do a deluxe version with extra goodies in it. So the legacy label knows who their audience is, and they're aiming at things. I believe they just did a Guns N' Roses release that has the regular Appetite for Destruction, a deluxe one, and a super deluxe one. Now, again, I don't know if Legacy did that particular one, but that's an example of things that they do. You know, so they'll have like the Coltrane and the Miles Davis, and both Coltrane and Miles, along with Prince, have incredibly deep catalogs. So this is great. Well, now, as far as go ahead.
I just want to throw too. You know, it's, and I'm looking through this, and I see that they have all this stuff. The only thing is, they don't have access to the vault, right? They just only release the previously released albums that we've all had. So,
are we sure about that? Because even the press release said live recordings and unreleased material. Would that not be the vault?
That could be the live 1985 CD or DVD.
Yeah, that may be things that were previously released live, you know, shot stuff like, you know, Purple Rain 99. Well, actually, I guess Warner Brothers put that out. For 95 forward, that's not anything from the 80s. Well, that's what I'm saying. But we don't know what that is. But the thing is, I'm just saying they don't necessarily have access to the vault of the years that most people, you know, I guess the cherished part seems to be still in the hands of Warner Brothers. Right? They're getting ready to put out a release. Right. But they're getting ready to put out a release of that material, right? This specifically only talks about the albums that were previously set out. So I'm curious if they'll be able to do these bootleg type series on Prince versus what may be in the mix with Warner Brothers has set to do some things like that. I don't know.
Well, they'll have to do it around the stuff that they, you know, don't have access to initially, because as the release says, now they get things from Gold Experience moving forward for the most part up until 2010, and then when they get the Prime Warner stuff in 2011 or 2021, they don't get Purple Rain and they don't get Parade. So that's another thing. And I think that's where Warner's comes in. I think the Warner's deal, and I haven't seen it, I think it staggers their interest to that point. I think Sony has just put themselves in a position like Geffen did back when they signed Aerosmith, when Aerosmith was still on Columbia. They said, look, we'll wait till your contract is over, but once it's over, you roll with us. So once the Warner Brother expires, you know, I guess partially in 2021, all that stuff will come out, and then when they get their hands on the Purple Rain and Parade, all that will come out. And again, Legacy, as a distributor and packaging, you know, concern, they do a great job. And when they, you know, if they got the stuff now immediately, best believe it's coming out.
Yeah,
because Sony don't play.
There's no throwing. So the real question will come, which I'm sure they are talking about, is, and if I was Warner Brothers, I would be arguing that all of that material that was recorded during when he was with us, that it hasn't been released, if it ain't ours, we are entitled to it, right? Because normally how those record contracts work, everything you're doing during that period is for that label. So that's why I'm kind of questioning, like, to see how that works, because that vault material that a lot of people talk about during those years, they were recorded on contract with Warner Brothers. So I'd be curious to see if they are like, yo, yeah, all the other stuff is cool, but he was signed to us during that, so we have dibs on that, or do we own that? That's what I'm kind of wondering. So I wonder if there would be like sort of rival releases between, there's going to be a Sony stuff and there'll be Warner Brothers stuff, right? Which there probably would. Right, Warner Brothers is getting ready to put out the piano thing. It'd be interesting to see if Sony was to come back and, well, we're going to put out the real piano on a mic 2016 version versus your 1983. So that's what I'm kind of curious to see. about all that material. I don't think Warner Brothers is out of the picture at all. Like,
oh no, not yet, no.
So one thing I just want to restate, I'm looking at the Legacy Recorders website, Legacy Recordings. It says the agreement also includes rights to previously released material recorded post-95, including singles, B-sides, remixes, non-album tracks, live recordings, and music videos. The comma could be confusing, so that could be previously released of all those things, or that was just like one specific thing, and B-sides is another thing. Like, I'm thinking of, for example, Call My Name's B-side with Silver Tongue. And I'm not sure a lot of people know about that, but I think that was maybe online only, or maybe that little promo CD. But things like that, or an actual unreleased, like, is Deliverance included in this now? Things like that.
Yeah, I would think anything that is owned, that was, recorded by Prince on his own would probably be game for these types of releases, which is be a good thing, right?
And that's technically in the vault, right?
Right, but I'm saying when I say the vault, I'm talking about those Warner Brother years in the vault. A lot of that stuff that people talk about a lot of times. Can they put out the original Dream Factory or Crystal? Well, that would be, I don't know. You know what I mean? So a lot of those sort of tracks, and it'd be curious to see what happens with that. But continue on, Big Sexy.
Well, that's pretty much it. Again, with the Legacy label, and I have a lot of their stuff. I think now that they have it, for the interest they do have, they're going to do a great job with it, getting it out. But one thing, you just mentioned is, and this is part of what triggered Prince's beef with Warner's, the stuff that he didn't give them. Who owns that? For instance, like the song Extra Lovable. That was recorded originally back in 82, 83. So what happens to that? Now, because what really triggered Prince's beef is, we know, but for listeners who don't know, there was a conversation Prince was having with someone from Warner's who essentially said, hey, I can't wait to get your next album because it already belongs to us. And Prince hadn't even started working on it yet, and he felt that was like an invasion of his creative privacy, which it is. So again, everything he records or recorded, who owns that he didn't give to Warner's? That's a great question, because are they going to do a Dream Factory, a Camille? What happens to the Paisley stuff? What happens to a track like Murph Drag, which is the jam? We don't know. Hopefully the estate can work this out. I'm sure Warner's will want their piece of the pie. But in the end, assuming the estate maintains Prince's vision on his publishing, making that assumption, this can only benefit the fans. Because if you got Sony Legacy on it, releasing things, they will come out. I don't know why Warner's dragged their feet, but Legacy will come out with it, and they'll come out very strong.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. I think no matter who puts this stuff out, they have to almost feel like they got to get somebody out there to get out in the press. More than just a press release. But what I'm talking about is, there's got to be somebody who can tell the story of it. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of things now are so reliant on the story of the artist, whoever that artist is, or that interview. You look at things like The Breakfast Club and things you see on YouTube. Those are so much driven of these artists. You sort of fall in love with them because you get to hear them speak, or you get to understand their situation. And I think with Prince, there needs to be something out there that can let people know that these releases are out there beyond just a press release. And, to me, I sort of feel like these press releases only sort of speaks to people who are looking for that. But for the kids out there who aren't following Prince, right, there needs to be some kind of component, hopefully, that they're able to know that these releases are out there and why they're important. Like why you should go back and listen to this. To put these albums in context, so they're not just dropping these things and people don't know, the Gold Experience. Like, we understand the context of that album, everything that was involved behind that. But to somebody who doesn't, they might not even pay attention to it. They don't know what that means. Like, and they'll probably fall into, I know what KaNisa hates. Well, is this on Purple Rain? Right? If they don't know, no, he was going through his battles. So I hope that there's a component, that the educational piece on it, that puts these releases in the proper context of why they're important. Why is the Rainbow Children album so good, right? Not only for what you listen to, but for what it meant, you know. So that's the other thing I think they have to try and figure out as well. All right, so AntPooh, I know we've already talked a lot of stuff, but give us your take on this situation.
Well, my take is when I saw that, I said, oh, that's nice. I guess I'll finally get a copy of the Gold Experience because eBay and the aftermarket, they trying to rape a brother, what, $60, $70, $80 for that hard press. I'm like, I'll find it some other way. So hopefully I can get a decent copy of that at a fair price. Overall, echo one of our brothers, I'm going to take a wait and see approach to it. For me, I think the majority of the fans whose interest would be piqued by this might already own these tracks, or, you know, there might be a small minority like myself that weren't able to get it at a fair price. So they might like, oh, finally, now I can get it, for like hopefully $20. But overall, it's really not piquing my interest. In a sense, hopefully they may do an expanded, unreleased material, maybe some first takes on it, some Studio 1 or Studio 2 track of it, or maybe what I'd really like, and I hate to compare him to Michael Jackson, but similar to the Off the Wall, the Thriller, and the Bad anniversary releases, where in between the songs we're listening to people, not just Michael, but also other engineers, producers, songwriters, talk about what went into the process of making these songs, giving us a background I think with Thriller there was a PYT demo that's totally different than what was released, and, you know, getting the insight of why that was scrapped or why he made the adjustments. So maybe if it's something like that, and I understand this is 2018 and we're moving into 2020s. These releases can be more than just audio. They can be visual as well, where, you know, there was that really great Prince of Paisley Park documentary that went with Love Sexy. So I'm hoping that as Prince had all these ideas from movies and was recording so much, that maybe there is video of him in the studio rehearsing and putting these songs together that would make for a great audio video release to these. So I'm very hopeful, but on the surface with, you know, what was announced, I'm just like, well, let me get that Gold Experience and let's wait and see what else Sony has up their sleeves.
All right. And, you know, again, we're bringing up Michael because he's on that. He has dealings with this label before, but we got to keep them on their P's and Q's as fans in the marketplace, because I do remember there was some controversy over one of the Michael Jackson albums that came out after his death, and a lot of people were saying that it was not Michael's voice on those songs and it was Bill.
Oh yeah.
You know, we have to keep the same energy, right, that they had on their throat about that, you know, we got to make sure that they come legit. We can't have that happen with Prince's stuff, right? So, you know, everything is all good and stuff until it ain't, but we can't never forget, like, yo, this is Prince. So he gave you enough material, or those albums were perfect the way that they were made, you know, especially the later ones and stuff. So you don't need to be adding stuff to it or altering around funny nonsense with it. So I just have to make sure we keep that too. Like we got an eye open, goddamn.
So what you're saying is that Justin Timberlake and Drake, we nobody's calling for you to have.
Hell no.
No.
I didn't even want to go down that route, but you know, I don't know how they got access to the Michael songs on this Drake thing, but yeah, we can't have that happen. The bags are fun. You know, those are great bags. I'm sure there's a lot of money be dangled in people's face, but that's not do Prince like that. That ain't. Come on. Man.
It's like an all due. I don't want to get sidetracked. All due respect.
Go ahead, Chris. Say that again.
What's the significance of 2021 as far as them being able to get access to the earlier albums? Now, I know with the Warner Brothers arrangement, the basically, as it was because of the Copyright Revision Act of 1970, whatever, that after the master recording copyright after 35 years, they could get access to their copyright. The artist could get access to their copyright back to their music again. And for you, it was in 1978, and Warner Brothers realized that year after year they were going to be giving up copyrights to all of his albums. And in order to make good on it, they essentially gave him all the copyrights to all the albums ahead of time in exchange for a brand new album. And there were just some other little handshake things that happened as a result of that. But I guess when I'm trying to, so this new Sony deal, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of retracting and going back, but I wanted everybody to be able to kind of say their piece on this deal. As far as the Sony scenario is concerned, again, in 2021, they're supposed to be able to get access to those back albums that he had obtained the copyrights from Warner Brothers. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out who's sitting on these albums right now, and what is the significance of 2021? I guess that was the only piece that was kind of a question in my mind. I couldn't figure out the significance of that.
I can only gather that must be the year that, whether that was negotiated prior to his death, that Warner Brothers doesn't have distribution rights to those albums or something. I don't know the final answer to that. I'm just only kind of guessing at that. But that is a good question. So what is Warner Brothers going to do up till that point?
Well, and the new album too that was part of this Warner Brothers arrangement, because the arrangement was, as far as releases were concerned, that Warner Brothers was going to do the Purple Rain Deluxe Edition. Mm-hmm. That was going to be done, and also a brand new album. The brand new album did not happen. So that you got another item in there too. But again, that's on the Warner Brothers side of things. But I'm just trying to figure out what kind of. I'm just trying to figure out exactly how this Sony deal kind of layers over this current arrangement that's going on with Warner Brothers, regardless of him being with us or not.
Well, I think the new album that you mentioned is Artificial Age, so they did put that out.
And Plectro Electrum, both of those came out. Yeah. But maybe it's Prince Forever, because Prince Forever was WB. Does that count? Or was it unreleased new album?
I'm not sure. That's what I guess what I'm trying to figure out is just that was everything that was in the contract as far as what was part of this arrangement been fulfilled? But yeah, I guess it was my only primary question was just the 2021 distinction, but I guess there's really not an answer to that. I guess the estate or somebody must be sitting on those albums and plans to do something with them. With somewhere between now and 2021, is something special supposed to happen with them, that whoever is the current right holders to that is going to do something that's going to be, I doubt it. With the way things have been kind of dragging, I just can't see anything magnificent happening. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I think that's kind of been the synopsis of everyone. It's just got to wait and see what happens.
Well, yeah, I think, I don't know. So we do have, obviously we know we have a couple of releases that are coming out soon, the piano and the microphone, and then of course the album on Tidal. Well, initially it'll be released on Tidal, then it'll be released everywhere else. So he does have work coming out. I guess, again, my question is, I hope these albums have impact, or, I know they're going to have impact with the fans. At least I would hope so. I can't wait for them to come out. But I always go back to, when Prince was alive, Artificial Age, I'm looking at it now. It says, and that album came out on Warner Brothers debut, 51,000 copies his first week. Total sales at this point, or that point, was 66,000 copies. And this, we're talking about Prince. So, a lot of cats wasn't even checking for him when he was here putting out new joints. So I'll be curious to see, obviously when people pass, there's interest that goes up, But I just hope that we can go out and support the releases, whether you buy it or you stream it or whatever. But again, to me, without sort of that story component or somebody trying to get out there in front of these, I just don't want them to be sort of lost in a sea of releases that happen every week. You know, I think his music is important, and but I do love that, you know, signing these deals. To me, signing these deals with the companies like this, I love it because it's going to put some money. I hope it's put money in the family's hands, you know, at least keeping it going for them. I think that's great. I just, at the other side, I want to make sure that I hope that from a fan's perspective, we can get this music out there and we can get the stuff that we want to hear. I think it's great that other people that don't be into Prince have access to this stuff. I argue they have access to it now. Like, there ain't nothing stopping nobody from going and listen to his albums on the streaming services, whether they know they exist or not. I don't think it's access is the problem. I just think it's been education and what it means.
That's really interesting, because I know when the Extra Lovable video leaked on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, I was surprised at how many fans, like, who had like the Prince picture on their social media and everything, had said they'd never heard that song before. And I'm like, this song's been around for 30 years and it was on his last album. Like, Hidden Run Phase 2 is an amazing Prince album, but I'm not sure how many people have actually heard it, even among fans who consider themselves huge Prince fans. And that's kind of my main concern. Like you said, like, we are all talking about we want music. I'm like, but have you heard what he's done already? Because I'm not sure a lot of people have.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around this 66,000 number that
I know,
just threw out. Now, are we talking about physical album sales or both physical and purchases on Amazon for the MP3 versions?
It doesn't make the distinction. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page here, so it doesn't.
I'm also curious to see, well, that's also updated by humans too, so who knows what that number actually is. So, but I'm also curious to see exactly how that compares up to somebody who's actually technically on the radio right now, because most everybody nowadays listens to albums via streaming. So it's just the nature of it. I just don't know how many people are actually going and buying physical albums. I mean, old school folks like us, we do. But I'm not going out and buying Drake's new album. I'll stream it. I'm not, it's just the way that I am. There's certain artists that I will, because I need to have the physical copy. But I think that with a lot of artists nowadays, that's come out in the last, 5-10 years, their means of sales are streams and MP3 purchases. And I would really kind of like to see what kind of ratio it is on on physical products. But that's 66,000.
It is a low number. It was a low number when it was announced back when it came out, right? His album debuted at number 5. In the second week, it went down to number 22. And these numbers are actually coming from Hip Hop DX, which is one of those sites that does track the current stuff at the time. But you're right. You want to put this in context in terms of what is everybody else doing. I'm looking at something here.
Hit and Run.
So go ahead.
Well, I know, like Hit and Run, they were actually given away at concerts. Like, matter of fact, we went to go see him at the Prince Piano and Microphone. You got a copy of Volume 2 as you were walking out the door. So those actually counted towards physical sales. So, and there was, I know just in Atlanta there was, 8,000 people that saw those shows. So that's 8,000 right there in physical sales. That was part of.
You cutting out, sir?
Numbers.
No,
yeah.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, so, okay. Yeah, so anyways, it's just unusual. Yeah, that's very shocking. But you're right. I hope that the new albums do get some impact and do actually get seen and heard. And I'm definitely looking forward to whatever comes out, because I'm assuming that even if it is just the albums that were released previously, that at least with the what Sony Legacy has done in the past and the how they feel about their work and how they take pride in what they do, that they'll at least, in some form or fashion be remastered and, tweaked out, and maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe we'll get some extra tracks that maybe came from those recording sessions that got left on the cutting room floor. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to it no matter what it is. And just like I guess someone had said just before, to be able to get those albums that you're missing and not have to go to Discogs and pay someone $70 to get it. That's going to be nice to be able to complete your collections.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, right.
Even this, I'm just thinking, we were talking about them doing something actually like the Gold Experience, Emancipation, Rainbow to the Joy, Fantastic, Rainbow Children, 3121. I mean, I would argue that those albums do not need remastering. Like they sound, in my opinion,
absolutely, yeah,
those are fine albums. I would be shocked. Listen, I'll tell you this: they'll take them. I'll buy it just on general purpose if they actually have the balls to release the Emancipation album as it was released. Like, are they going to put a 3 CD set package out in the stores today? I would buy that just because I don't have mine anymore, and I would
Crystal Ball.
Yeah,
put that out.
That would be great. So I would be curious to see what they do. I mean, a lot of these albums are fine unto themselves. It's just that they're hard to get. So I'd be very honest to see. And then again, remastering stuff, that's not a cheap process, and there's a lot of work here. You're not going to be remastering 35 albums. Like that's a lot of work. Now I'd be shocked if they put the funds to do that. I would want them to, but I'd be very curious who they're going to have there to decide what to do with these albums, which ones need this, with these tracks. I'm just very curious. Are they just going to just put them out? And again, are we thinking they're really going to release 35 albums on CD in the next 5 years? I'd be very interested to see if they do that. I would love them to, but I'd be very curious to see if they do that, or are they just going to re-releasing these on streaming services where, it's just sort of a click of a button and there's no, what I mean? So I'm curious to see what that means, what these numbers mean 5 years from now.
I mean, I have to say that Tidal does have most of his discography already. They took off Emancipation, Musicology, 3121, Crystal Ball, and a couple of others in the last couple of years because of all the drama. But it was like 95% there, and they still have a good chunk of his music. So at least one streaming service does. But again, like you said, it'll be interesting once they do release the rest of it to the others, what kind of traction they will get if the story is missing. Because a lot of people, like you said, when they're fans of Prince, they're fans of him, the institution of Prince. And a lot of people are always like, give me the music, but it's kind of more of what he represents than the music. So that story has to go with the music for people to consume it.
And I would throw in there, we are only assuming they mean the releases in the way that we traditionally think, right? There's nothing mentioned in here that they would be physical products. So we don't, we have no idea. Would I love them to be physical products? Yes, but we shall see, right? But, shout out to the estate and legacy. I'm excited I'm just curious to see what it is. And I'll be very excited once they put a release date out there. Then we know what we're going to get. Any thoughts? We mentioned Tidal. We also heard that there was a couple of the heirs who had some questions on Tidal having Prince's music on there, and they brought up a news report where they were saying that maybe Tidal is fudging the numbers on releases there, and maybe they didn't want Prince's work to sort of be caught up in that alleged situation. Now the judge, I'm paraphrasing a lot of this, but the judges came back and said, no, we're going to throw that out. We're going to move forward with the Tidal deal with Prince. Just want to get some of your guys' reactions. I'll start with AntPooh first.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused by the whole fudging the numbers because why would you care if they're fudging the numbers upwards, which would mean that you're getting a larger royalty check? Am I wrong or right in that assessment?
That's an interesting question.
Because I'm just seeing that because they mentioned Jay-Z's album, Kanye's albums, I think Beyonce, and they were trying to allege that they were inflating their numbers. But I'm like, well, why would you care if the check is still the same or greater, right? But whatever. My thing, that whole situation is, it just seems like I don't think that those people know what they're doing, which that's why I'm kind of glad they signed this Sony deal, because it means that there's going to be money in their pocket and hopefully will placate some of the siblings that are involved with the estate, so that it doesn't get to an issue where they end up selling the music. That is, to me, that is my worst fear, that eventually they just don't want to deal with it and they want to end up selling Prince's music, which, in my opinion, again, I don't know Prince personally. I don't think that's what he want. I don't believe he would want a corporation owning his music and controlling everything, just based on how he's maneuvered. But overall, God, I hope this just plays itself out and just, I hate to say this, but I just hope they fucking go away.
Wow. Heard it here first. AntPooh. Send all letters from the estate. I'm just joking. KaNisa.
Yeah, I think that's just a common thing that happens in streaming. So Spotify had the same complaints, so does Apple Music. So, I mean, it's kind of the nature of the business. How do you really track the numbers? Like, does it count when you listen to it for 2 seconds, or when it automatically plays when you open the application, or like, what exactly, how do you even begin to keep up with that? So I saw a lot of feedback about that. They're like, well, Tidal does this and that. I'm like, Google Spotify numbers, Google Apple Music numbers, Google any streaming service numbers, and they all get the same complaint. So that's I think that's pulling straws at this point.
Chris, any thoughts on the some of the heirs thing with Tidal?
Well, I think I was, kind of looking this up, and I think that one of the things that they were saying on here was one of the reasons why there was problems with the inflation of the numbers was because the people that were paying royalties, the people that were getting inflated were Kanye, Beyonce, and Jay-Z. And so they were intentionally inflating those numbers so that so the specific artists would get specific royalty checks. But the problem was that they had claimed that, for instance, like they had claimed that Kanye West's album had been streamed 250 million times in its first 10 days of release, and they only have 3 million subscribers. So you can kind of do the math that the album would have had to been, every single subscriber would have had to stream his album like many, 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 multiple times. And that's kind of where the problems kind of come. But it was kind of padding specific people's pockets. And I can see where that is a little bit of a problem. If you're a label whose artist, you're trying to get the artist onto the streaming service, and they're kind of pushing numbers and trying to get some exclusivity to some certain things. And so I think there's some things that I think there's problems that are there that obviously cause a lot of issues for labels and artists. The artists obviously would be a little bit happy because the numbers are inflated and they're going to get a bigger paycheck, as you already said. But I guess there has to be some type of proof that this is actually what's happening. As far as Prince's music being put on there, I'm not a fan. And the only reason why I'm not a fan of it, I understand the reasoning why Prince even started the arrangement with Jay-Z and Tidal, and there was just better artist distribution, better royalties. But I think that because of how small of a distributor, I just don't want to have to get another membership to another one of these places again, just so I can hear this music. And I've already got Spotify. I'm already all in on Spotify. I just don't like the whole competing thing. And I think it's a real disservice to the fans to force them to be with a specific provider that's actually technically a little bit more inferior on the service level than a Spotify or anything else. I just think it's a real disservice to the fans. But, whatever is going to help them make the most money and keep the music coming, then do what you got to do. I'll just wait the extra 10 days and get it from wherever else it gets put out.
Now, Chris, let me ask you, what makes Spotify more superior?
I'm just talking about as far as the volume of music that you have and I think that the app itself is easier to use. I think it's more user friendly. I've tried Tidal. I tried Tidal for the 90 days and it was fine. I didn't have necessarily any problem with it. They were just a little bit more expensive. I think at the time that I was there, it was like $14.99 as opposed to $9.99. And it was just, they had some, extra HD audio options and things that were available. But I just think that I would prefer to see Prince on Spotify, not because of the royalty part of it, because they sucked more than Tidal on the royalty side of it. However, the volume of people that listen would be there, and I want more people to hear his music. And I think that Tidal's, granted, I think Tidal's got probably a little bit more targeted audience, not specific music genres, but I want Prince's music to be heard by the most people as possible, and I just don't think Tidal just has those numbers to support that justify it.
Oh, okay. Would that be the same sort of logic then to say, like, if Prince you would rather have Prince on a major label that had bigger distribution than him putting them out himself?
Obviously, if he was still alive, we'd have to look at the numbers here because he's going to be concerned about how much of his control he's going to have over his music. And he's also going to be concerned about how much money he's going to be making. So whatever's best for Prince is definitely the way to go. I'm just talking about it being as a user and wanting more people to hear it. So I think I'm living under the haze that the estate is going to do what's best in this situation. And I just kind of have to believe that they're doing what's best for the estate. So, and for Prince's legacy. And I just, not to get away from the question, I just think that
I was waiting for you to come back around.
I do want to come back around. I do want to say that I just want more people to hear it.
For sure.
And I just think that if you have a brand new Prince album and you put it on Tidal, there's not going to be a bunch of folks that are going to hear it.
Right.
So whereas on Spotify, it's like kablow. It's like, and on top of that, Spotify, even when Prince put the albums back onto Spotify, it was massive. They had all types of, just the publicity and the front page. And they were pushing the crap out of it. And I just don't think that Tidal just does the same level of marketing and saturation that
so to go back
Spotify
to the question
has.
of
and again, but it's got to be numbers.
So just to be clear, so again, it's more important, and what you're saying is that he should be on the biggest platform, right, as opposed to the smaller platform, or you know what I mean? Like that's kind of what I'm.
But not to his detriment. But not to his detriment. I would never want him to do something. Just because Spotify is a bigger, better scenario as far as distribution and saturation is concerned. I definitely would take my check out of the box if I felt like it would be of detriment to the estate or his legacy. Absolutely, but because it's a money thing, I think that's what it all boils down to, right?
It always
is whether or not
down to that with Prince, right?
Crystal
Ball album release was a money thing.
Right.
Like I can get more money putting it out myself than I could selling.
Right, but where's the balance? Is the amount of extra royalty that you're getting on Tidal going to balance it out over putting on something at Spotify that has a smaller royalty but a way larger audience? Well, I don't know what those numbers are. I don't know what that is.
Right. Well, I think you go to sort of the outlook of that particular artist right now. Prince is a guy who is more about ownership and his money than to be the most popular, right? So I think it's in line to like what his outlook was through his career, right? So that's why I say like I hear what you're saying. I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from with it. But I think with Spotify, and I don't use Spotify. I have nothing against them, personally. And I'm currently not a Tidal user as well. I use Google Play for whatever reason because I've always been with them. But I think that, in the terms of Prince and them, they may have a bigger platform. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, so the biggest album that just came out as we're recording this is the Drake album, right? And going by the Twitter responses, it seems as if his album did not debut on Spotify initially. It was on every place else. And
right.
That's the biggest thing. Now, I'm just to say that,
No, well, and Spotify has a really bad rap about how poorly they treat the artists as far as the royalties are concerned.
Right. So that's why I'd be saying, why would you want even somebody beyond that?
I get that, but it's just, where's the balance? Yeah, I don't know where the right answer to this is. But you've got Tidal. You can say, oh, well, that's really fantastic. But you're also going right back to these brand new news about them fudging their numbers, so you don't even know what's really happening anyway. So
alleged.
It's alleged, and they may all actually do that. Actually, but go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But Chris, question: you said that they fudged the numbers, saying 250 million streams and only have 3 million users. But I mean, I know you have to be aware that there are people who use other people's accounts when it comes to like Netflix and Hulu, HBO Go. So why not Spotify? So it is possible. I can have a Tidal account and 10 different people could have used it to stream Drake's new album.
Understood, but you're talking about it doesn't take a real mathematician. It's all 3 million people, and you got 250 million streams. That's a lot. That's a lot of streams for that individual album per user. That's okay.
I'm a game.
What is that? 8,000 streams per user
okay.
or something?
I'm gonna use myself as an example. I have Netflix, but I think at any one time, 6 different other people are using my account, and probably all 6 of us are watching Luke Cage. So even though it's one account, 6 different people watch Luke Cage.
Yeah, but not 800.
Well, I hear you.
There's a big disparity of the numbers.
Let me ask this question.
Sure.
Why do we think that, as small as Tidal is compared to Spotify and Google, Apple, we haven't even mentioned Apple, right? If it is, why is that? It seems to me, and again, I don't even use the service, but what I see. Why is it such under the microscope? It ain't even that big of a player. Like, why? You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't the other ones be the ones that people would put the reports out? They actually have the platform and the numbers and da-da-da. But why is this one, which is probably, supposedly artist driven or whatever, why is that the one that's in the spotlight? I mean, facts are Prince went to them and did the deal. You can read with Prince's own words. Well, we can speculate this and that. He told us exactly why he did it. So we don't have to argue that point. But I'm just saying, like, why does Tidal seem to be the one that's under the microscope?
My guess it would be something with just competition. I think that when you have scenarios where people's albums are getting exclusively released on a small player like Tidal, all you got to do is a couple phone calls to Spotify's lawyers, and they get this stuff going. I can only imagine it's coming from their competitors. I mean, to your point, I don't see any specific reasoning why they're always in the papers. I don't know why. But I think part of the findings that they're discovering are interesting of sorts. Don't really concern me much, except when you're specifically releasing Prince's new album on that service only. Then it's a concern of mine. But there has to be a reason that somebody's got them under such a fine-tooth comb or a microscope. I don't know what the answer to that is, but it has to be. I would imagine it's coming from their competitors.
Right. And now, so that whole report that the heirs are talking about, some of the heirs, let me be clear, came from a Norwegian newspaper. Now, isn't Skype a Norwegian company?
Yeah, I believe could well be, but it was it was some British media firm that started this whole process. It was not just Norwegian thing. It's,
sure.
So there's more people involved.
And we don't even know the name of them. They don't have no journalistic weight to us, right? It's just a rumor we heard out there and people running. I think I'll answer my own question. I think the reason why Tidal is such I guess I see it as a threat. But when you because you have, Beyonce, right? If not one of the biggest artists out there, whether you want to like that or not. You have Jay-Z, obviously, somewhat of a free agent, I would imagine, and very powerful in business and things of that nature. And then they have ties to other artists and they're able to sway people and this and that. I would imagine that is and now, he's sort of putting his weight on a digital platform. I would imagine that's a threat to a lot of people because, well, we're not getting paid off of that. And what if they're able to convince other artists to not give us their material? We have nothing, right? Whoever owns Spotify, which I have no idea who that person is, if they're one of the biggest platforms and you don't know who owns them, you got to ask yourself, that's a question. But you know who owns Tidal, right? Because that person, no, he doesn't go in the studio and create work. And his whole platform is based off other artists' work that he ain't really paying. So if that's your business and you got, some of the top artists in the world over here, they got their own platform that if they want to be really greedy, they keep all the music over to themselves. You damn right they're going to be in the paper all the time because that's exactly what artists always be talking about. Once you get away from everybody eating off what you do, they're going to want to shut you down because he's a threat to the industry. Like if he could convince all these other artists to go over and do what he's doing, then how's their platform going to survive? They don't make no music. So what they going to put out? Nothing. So their whole thing is based off of other people's work. And you got some of the top talent in the game creating work and putting it out on their own platform. That's hella dangerous. Like they can put out albums whenever they want. Well, they just dropped the Carter album recently. Again, you ain't got to be a fan of Jay-Z or Beyonce, but that's a powerful thing when they could just be like, we're just going to put some shit out and we're going to make a big dollars off of it. And ain't nobody else going to have it. Then they ain't eating. So whoever ain't eating, it's, oh man, man, let's get some reports out there because this is some bullshit. Like, how they going to get away? And I'm not even going to throw in the component of them being black and all that. Y'all can do the math on that yourself. So I think that's why Google is so like, you see them sort of pushed in a funny light because I think they actually see them as a threat. And if they can convince other artists to go along with that type of thing, where's Apple at if they don't have no music on there? They don't make music. They're best stop. So they can put a big check in front of Drake or somebody else to convince you that it's in your best interest. Just take my money and let me have your music, but I don't want you thinking that you could do this. And I think Jay-Z, Beyonce, and some of the other artists that are involved with Tidal, that's seen as a threat to those guys. And, I just feel like we have to question the Spotify. How long has Spotify been around? You're like, why do we even hold them in such esteem? They ain't did shit. They just created an app and they streaming other people's work, but it ain't like they actually, you don't know them from years and years of putting in work and trust. You don't even know who the hell owns that company. So that's why we have to sometimes be careful about why we putting such trust in these brands over people that we know actually do work. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's what Prince was all about. He was like, hey, I see what they doing over here. You know what? Pull all my shit. It may not make no sense, but I understand ownership and understand money. And sometimes it may be bigger than money. He's like, I want this thing to grow because I understand what this actually could mean. And I know they're going to hate it, So that's
right. But but go ahead. For the numbers, though, just for the numbers, Spotify has 140 million users.
For sure.
That's a far cry.
That is. Spotify owners just getting caked up. You're right.
Right.
It is like the balance conversation, like Chris was saying, because I'm a Tidal subscriber and I love Tidal and I love how they have exclusive print stuff like piano and microphone soundboard stuff or music videos or some of the stuff, some video on there as well that nobody else has. But at the same time, because it is only on Tidal, people haven't heard it. Because Hit and Run Phase 2 is only streaming on Tidal, certain people have heard it. And it's a balance of course, Prince is not going to have his stuff on Spotify, and he'd be like, well, if you want my stuff, you need to do the work. He's kind of had that thing going always, and a lot of the model of Tidal is kind of like MPG Music Club used to be in a way, because he could put stuff up all the time, and he had his Purple Picks of the Week on there. He was very involved with them up until the week that he ducked out. But at the same time, right now it's about making sure his legacy exists. And so the question that we're always faced with as fans and as or the state and everything is doing things as he wanted, which means nobody would really know about him except for the people who are really checking for it, or making sure people know about him, which would go against what he wanted, but then people would know the music. So that's going to be, I feel like whatever happens, no one's ever going to be happy about that because of that disconnect or that duality. But it's just interesting because we want people to know the music, but we also want to do it in a way that he would approve of, which I don't think would be very profitable and would keep people from knowing him.
Well,
that brings up a good point, though, too, because of the fact that, when he was alive, he was more concerned about his ownership of his work. And now that he's no longer with us, it's more concerned about people hearing him and continuing the legacy. So now where are we at in this discussion?
Well, I think it depends on who you ask that question. I think to his estate, it's more about, and then this is not a disparaging thing. It's about making sure we got all our money straight. Listen, his legacy would live forever.
So what makes more sense then?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Like for me, I want the family to win. I'm into generational wealth. So I want them to get paper. Whether or not most people on the world listens to Prince, that's the secondary concern. That's for me personally, because I feel like it's worth the family keeping the fruits of labor from whoever they got that inheritance from. Now, that may not be a fan's perspective, but on the other end, I say this: yeah, his legacy, I guarantee his legacy would live forever. If somebody, if a Sony or Apple or somebody say, here's $700 million, we want to buy the whole shot. Here's $700 million. I guarantee his legacy, his music could be you think you want to hear his music everywhere. It'd be everywhere because they have a financial reason to put that out there. It would be on TV shows, commercials. It'd be on every movie. His albums be on every platform. Now, his family would just get that $700 million, and that'd be it. They'd probably go on and generate billions off of that dollar. And then everyone would hear their music, right? So I think so to me, it depends on who you ask. I'm more into it so that the family can eat. Prince's music's going to survive regardless. Back then, he was doing his thing in the 80s, and a lot of us didn't know he existed. It survived then and flourished. It'll survive now. The music ain't going to go nowhere. Who controls it is the question, in my opinion. Because it isn't always about being the most popular person. But great stuff, which Prince is great, it's going to flourish on its own. It's going to be organic, no matter if it never comes out on the top brand. He was doing stuff in the 90s where a lot of people didn't hear. The stuff is dope. Some people are hearing it now. It trickles out. We meet people every day that were not Prince's fans during the heyday. They weren't Prince's fans in the 90s. But now they just now getting up on him. How did they? Because I heard a song somewhere or I saw this and never paid much attention. So it's going to get out there. But again, who owns and controls it? Who's going to reap the rewards of that? So I think to answer your question, depends on who you ask and what their opinion is. Now, for somebody else, it may be I want everyone to hear it. I want to strike a chord in a balance, which is great as well. But I just think that I just think
the reason why I said that is because
it's about ownership. But go ahead.
Go ahead. The reason why I said that was because of the fact that obviously they're not really, the ownership part of it is really not too much a part of the equation anymore. It's who's going to get the better distribution and who's going to be more passionate about getting this out there. Because I just find it hard to believe that if he was here, that all this would be going on as far as jumping ship to, going from Warner Brothers to Sony to this, that, and the other. It just seems like this isn't in alignment with what he would have wanted. So I think that particular component of it.
That's what Prince did. He jumped to the bag, right? He went, Warner Brothers Angel, okay, I'm going over here to EMI. They're going to give me a check for what I want. Okay, that's done. Now I'm going to go over here to Columbia. They're going to give me a check for what I want. And then I'm going to go to Target, and I'm going to get that check. And then what happened? The check came back to Warner Brothers. Oh, they're Warner Brothers now. They want to give me a check, and I get ownership. I'm going right back over there. So he always was jumping to, but he wanted to have ownership. Even if it looked like he was taking an L, he was like, hey, I may not be selling the amount of records, but I'm making more. I'm number one at the bank. I own all this stuff. Well, how come you don't put that out, Prince? Well, I don't want to. That ain't what I'm feeling. I own it, though. It's mine. I'll put it out when I want to. It didn't have to make no sense to nobody else. It made sense to him. He was still making millions of dollars. He had all his stuff was being taken care of. Oh, I'm going to just go on the road and get this paper. So I think he was always about the bag, and that's not a bad thing. But he always jumped ship. No,
I guess to your point, I just hope that just continues, and that we're just hope for the best. That's what we need to do right now. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, I feel you too on that. I feel you. I just that's what we just always got to remember when he was alive. A lot of people wasn't fucking with him like how we would like to. Now, of course, there's always changes when people pass. Now everybody, oh yeah, put this out. We're going to put this out. Now you can go, again, I ain't got to be the one to tell you. You can go pull up his tweets. You can go pull up what Prince said. Prince, how come they ain't putting out Purple Rain Deluxe? Or you can go ask Warner Brothers about that. He turned that in. So I ain't got no other. And so you can go talk to him. So it's already like what it is. But we know when people pass, now they start to see the value. Oh, we're going to make some money off of this. Yeah, we excited. We want to do this. We're putting out this now. But that's just the nature of the game. But I just think when you get to that part of the game, to me, it's important that the family is the ones who get the bread off of that situation, because that's just keeping it in the family. That's my opinion. It may not always make a lot of sense. It may make sense for some people to let's just go get that big check and wash our hands of it. But I always think there's so many ways they can make money because they have such a lot to work with. It's just that it's tied up in all of these different companies. You got Warner Brothers, then you had Universal for a little bit. That didn't work out. They had to get that money back. Now they getting with Sony, and also they have some disagreements. It seems like within the heirs of which way to go. There's certain people that want to do this, and so the family got to come together. And then they can start making these moves. But I'm rambling. I'm happy for Sony. I'm happy for this state. How about that?
That's where it's at.
Big Sexy, I don't think you got in on the title thing. Go ahead.
Well, I'm one of the few people like yourself, Michael. I don't use streaming. I don't give a damn about streaming. The thing is, though, I think what Sony's is really hedging their bet is, I was looking at some of the legacy packaging and box sets. That's aimed at people who want to actually own this music. To me, and I could be wrong, but to me, a streaming service is like AM radio back when I was a kid in the car. You're not paying for it. It's just there. So when people say, well, I'm streaming X numbers, nobody cares. Are you making those sales? No. So if this legacy thing will lead to purchases, like Mike said, if this leads to purchases to put money in his family's pocket, great. Now as far as the beef with the heirs and this whole deal about fudging numbers, it's like Ann said, if they're fudging the numbers up, shut up. But I've said from day one that this group of heirs is getting bad advice. Now, I don't know who that is. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but they're getting bad advice. And the person they're listening to definitely has an agenda here. So they need to not be led astray by this person and let people who know what they're doing do what they do, because this is the same group that had a problem with the music being moved out of Paisley over to that storage facility in L.A., which was the best move that could have happened. So to steal from Ant, they ought to just shut up and go away. Damn.
Well, all right. Shout out to this state. I don't want no smoke. I'm just joking. But any other last things, Chris? Any other things you wanted to bring up on this?
Chris?
Oh, did I lose Chris?
Uh-oh.
Well, you might be muted, sir, but you're still with us.
So essentially what you're saying, Mike, is can they sell it?
Yes. And I hope
Legacy can sell it.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not mad at it. I think it's a great thing. I just hit me up when they put a release date, and I'll be there to support it. It's simple. Simple.
Exactly. I'll be all over it when they do the HD tracks high resolution, like they did his first 6 albums, which I happen to have in high resolution. I will get these as well.
All right. Trying to think.
I'm back. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem,
I couldn't get my phone off on mute. My screen wouldn't come back on.
Hilarious.
I'm trying to mute so you don't have to hear all the extra things. No, nothing extra.
All right.
All that waiting for nothing.
Well, we got confirmation.
Sorry.
He didn't get taken out or something. I was like, what's going on?
No taking out. My phone took me out.
While we have you here, how is Funkatopia going, man? Any things, big things coming up down the line for you guys?
Yeah, man, it's been going fantastically well. We've been, we have the Funkatopia Radio Show and Funked Up app. You guys can download the Funked Up app and you can listen to a lot of Prince on the radio station. We have Prince blocks from 6 to 12 every single day, Eastern Standard Time, both 6 to 12. So it's like 12 hours of Prince music every single day. The ASCAP licensing fees are killing me, but it is what it is. It's listener supported. It's a great, it's got lots of listeners from all around the world, and people are loving it. And you never realize how many people are listening until you get to like an event like the Celebration where people are coming up to you 24/7. It's awesome. It's good. I mean, it's been fantastic. Got a lot of good traction, and okay. I'm happy to hear, folks like yourself that are just, keeping the ball rolling, and I'm loving it. I'm loving hearing all this activity out there.
Now I'm gonna be on my Kanye. I'm gonna be on my Kanye. I'm just joking with you, so it's in jokes. But Houseway, it ain't bigger than Spotify. See, I was messing with you.
No, it's not. But it's a very target audience. It's a very target audience. Extremely targeted.
Who was it targeted? No, I'm just messing with you. All right. No, shout out to Funkatopia. Definitely, I support it, man. I love it. I love what you're doing. It's phenomenal. Also, we got, we're going to give us some props and pounds here. KaNisa's show, Muse to the Pharaoh, is rising like a phoenix. For those who, I don't know if you're listening to this feed, you already know it, but for those who may be listening other places, tell us about Muse to the Pharaoh. What is that show about?
Yeah, so basically it's talking about Prince from a female perspective. So I have some of my friends from Tumblr come on sometimes. Our first episode was about how our lives have changed since Prince ducked out, which has been interesting ride since then. I had one episode where I talked to people or women who worked at First Avenue from 1982 to 1986, and they shared their experiences with watching Prince perform there or seeing him around town and encounters with him. And then our last episode was myself and Erica talking about rap in the Prince discography. We were trying to talk about some of the songs that are less talked about, not the Days of Wild, but more like Funky Bald Heads type stuff, just to shine a light on some of the other work that people may have skipped out on. But generally, we like to talk about topics that are less talked about on the main podcast, and especially from a female perspective, whether you're younger, like most of us are 30s, lower or upper 20s, and then pulling in some aunties, just, to help bridge the gap to introduce them to new audiences. So check us out.
Right on. You check that out right here, podcastjuice.net and all the other cool places. And also want to take the time to give out some shout outs to all the other Prince related shows out there. You know, we tip our hat to Dr. Funkenberry. We tip our hat to the Violet Reality, to Peach and Black, Prince's Friend. Is there something else that I am not remembering right now?
Music Snobs?
Music Snobs, of course.
PrinceSongs.org. Is that doing his covering of the discography from the beginning?
Yes, and of course, D'Angela with Grown Folks Music, when they do their Prince podcast over there. And in the, God, what do you call that? I was going to call it dystopia. Way out.
Grown Folks Music?
No. Symposiums, excuse me.
Oh, yes.
Shout out to the symposiums that she puts on. And just everyone that's out there doing their thing. Paisley Five and Dime. I can go on and on when I start to say that. Purple Underground. But all of it matters. All of it goes into this soup of education and celebration of Prince. And I know I love it, so I hope everyone else does too. Shout out again to Chris for joining us. Funkatopia. BigSexy and AntPooh. Shout out to KaNisa. Shout out to all those who are not here today that are part of Podcast Juice. And lastly, shout out to you, the listener, for helping us keep it going. Shout out to all my Patreon people out there. My name is Michael Dean. As I always say, work it like a job. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Then I say